Cap. Young Steve Rogers was never the strongest man in the room. However, he was the one who refused to back down from a fight and from a chance to be a hero. From being a frail kid in Brooklyn to becoming Captain America, his tragedy wasn't just the exclusion for being physically weak. It was the emotional and mental trauma that followed after his transformation. He lost his best friend, the woman he loved, and the world that he knew. The ice didn't just freeze his body, it took and froze everything he was familiar with. When he woke up, everything he knew was gone, replaced by a society that had left him behind. That loneliness and sense of moral displacement fueled every decision he made, from standing up to evil as the mighty Captain America to, in the end, finally choosing to live a life for himself and Peggy. Although Steve's physical strength was the serum, it was his heart and quiet grief that drove his service and honor. Nat. Natasha Romanoff's past is drenched in shadows. Trained from childhood in the Red Room to be an assassin, she was stripped from her family, stripped of her identity, and stripped of her choices, killing the innocence and childhood in her. Her defection to S.H.I.E.L.D. was less about politics and more about internal penance. Throughout the MCU, she's haunted by the ledger she can never clean, filled with red that in her eyes no amount of good can erase. But Natasha's story isn't about guilt, it's about grace. Every decision she made, from mentoring Wanda, taming the Hulk, and leading the Avengers when they fracture, can all be seen as acts of quiet redemption. When she sacrifices herself on Vormir, it's the first time she dies on her own terms, not as a weapon, but as a person. The girl who was trained to feel nothing became the soul of the team that felt everything. Wanda. Wanda's story is heartbreak layered across countless universes. From losing her parents to a Stark bomb, losing her brother in Age of Ultron, having to kill Vision, which quickly became an obsolete death, only to see him die again, her life is defined by loss. Her powers, born from chaos, mirror her emotional state. The more she feels, the more reality around her bends. WandaVision isn't a story of a villain. It's the story of a woman who tried to rewrite grief into happiness. Her tragedy isn't that she became the Scarlet Witch. It's that she had to destroy the only family she could ever create to set others free. Wanda represents how trauma doesn't just break heroes, it reshapes them into something unrecognizable, yet deeply understandable. T'Challa. T'Challa's journey is about the weight of legacy. Losing his father in civil war pushes him into kingship far too soon, forcing him to reconcile tradition with progress. His tragedy is subtle. It's not about loss of life, but loss of innocence. The revelation that Wakanda's isolation caused global suffering forces T'Challa to question everything his nation stood for. By choosing to open Wakanda to the world, he turns pain into purpose. Chadwick Boseman's real-life passing deepens this arc well, as fans now view T'Challa as both a symbol of resilience and a eulogy for ideals bigger than one man. The strength of T'Challa lies not in his suit, his throne, or vibranium, but in his humility to lead with empathy in a world addicted to vengeance. Strange. Stephen Strange's tragedy begins with his ego and ends with enlightenment. The world's top neurosurgeon loses everything in one car crash: his hands, his career, and his purpose. His obsession with healing turns into a spiritual reckoning when he learns that true power requires surrender, not control. Strange's evolution from arrogant skeptic to sorcerer supreme is about more than magic. It's about letting go of one's pride. Even as he becomes master of the mystic arts, he carries the scars of his own arrogance, constantly forced to balance intellect with intuition. Almost every spell he casts comes with a price: time, memory, or morality. By Multiverse of Madness, his story becomes one of acceptance. Sometimes the hero can't save everyone, and that's what makes him one. Bruce. Bruce Banner's curse is internal, a man constantly at war with himself. The Hulk isn't his enemy, he's Bruce's internal reflection. Banner's life is a cycle of fear, rejection, and repression. Every attempt to control the Hulk only deepens his suffering and conflict with the monster that lies within. Over time, he learns that acceptance and balance, not suppression, is the path forward. His transformation into Smart Hulk isn't a victory, but a fragile truce between two broken halves. Banner's tragedy is living as both the hero and the monster, constantly reminded that his greatest strength is also his greatest regret. He's a symbol of how trauma doesn't vanish, it evolves, and sometimes that evolution is the best peace you can hope for. Loki. Loki's tragedy lies in the shadows he was born under, forever the second son, and forever chasing affection he was never meant to have. On top of that, discovering that he was a frost giant shattered his sense of belonging, and every act of rebellion became a cry for validation. Across the MCU, Loki dies and returns not because he cheats death, but because he can't stop searching for his identity. By the time we see his noble and selfless decisions in the Loki series, he's no longer trying to rule the universe. He literally becomes the one to hold it all together. His development from trickster to multiversal protector proves that even the god of mischief can find purpose in empathy. Loki's story is a reminder that redemption doesn't erase your past, it redefines it. Bucky. Bucky Barnes' pain is built on lost control. Once a loyal friend and soldier, he becomes a weapon of destruction against his will. The Winter Soldier isn't just a persona, it's a prison that haunts his mind. Each flashback, each trigger word is a fragment of stolen humanity. His recovery throughout Civil War and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a slow climb towards escape and self-forgiveness. He carries the guilt of the lives he didn't choose to take, and the isolation that comes from never truly being free of his past. But his story is also one of healing, of friendship, therapy, and the courage to face the mirror. Bucky isn't the man he was or the weapon he became. He's the survivor learning how to live again. Peter Parker's life in the MCU starts lighthearted, but beneath the humor is heartbreak. A fatherless kid idolizing Tony Stark, Peter's tragedy lies in his innocence colliding with reality. He loses his mentor, his identity, his friends, and ultimately his entire existence in their memories. Every time he tries to do the right thing, the universe punishes him for it. Losing everyone and everything he cared for and loved and having to start his life from a blank slate is definitely a burden that a young 17-year-old should not have to carry. Yet Peter does with strength and resilience. No Way Home is his emotional graduation. He finally understands the meaning of with great power comes great responsibility. His arc is not about becoming Spider-Man, but about becoming alone. By the end, he's not swinging for fame or friends. He's swinging for purpose, unseen and unknown, carrying the loneliness every hero eventually learns to bear. Thor's life, although portrayed in the MCU as comedic and lighthearted, is clouded by tragedy after tragedy. While he began as a proud prince to one of the most powerful kings in the MCU, ready for war and glory, everything he had was stripped away from him piece by piece. He lost his father, his mother, his brother, his best friend, his home, and although evil, his sister, and even his own sense of worth. The fall of Asgard wasn't just a loss of a kingdom, it was the death of Thor's identity. Ragnarok forced him to see his power differently, not as a hammer, but as resilience that comes from within. Unfortunately, by the end of Infinity War and Endgame, Thor's trauma manifests as guilt and self-loathing, a god crushed under the weight of failure to stop the biggest threat to humanity. When he finally kills Thanos, it's not vengeance in the driver's seat, but rather grief. His journey from arrogance to vulnerability made him more human than divine, a hero rebuilding himself from rock bottom.
We're all gonna die.